USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the USCHO Weekend Review podcast. It is Tuesday, February 5th, and we're a couple days late because we wanted to include the first round of the Beanpot. This episode is brought to you by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Well, I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. And Jim, yesterday was the opening round of the Beanpot, a couple of 2-1 games, one that went into overtime for just a little bit. But why don't we go back and look at those two games first? Boston College and Harvard. And finally, BC has that non-conference monkey off its back.
25 games. It dated back to November of 2016. And as Jerry York kind of joked after the game, oh, it was only 25. I thought it was 45, I think he was almost trying to poke fun at the fact that we all follow that streak so much as he was trying to say that it's been a long streak. It's a nice one to get off your back. As he said, he's been on the other side of it where you win 25 in a row out of conference because your team just is playing that well. But we've discussed it before. I think that at some point when you continue to lose those type of games, it becomes a little bit mental. And last night was another one of those situations where it could have that mental toughness or lack thereof could have crept in. Harvard with a late game power play. I think they had the final minute and 57 were on the power play. And they pulled their goalie halfway through that, a little less than halfway through, and it was a 6-on-4. But to BC's credit, they did not allow a shot on goal. There were some great looks by Harvard, but blocked shots all along the way, and BC holds on. It was not the exciting game that you sometimes expect in a Beanpot. More methodical. And anybody will tell you the first Monday of the Beanpot, playing that early game, it's very difficult in a 17,000 plus seat stadium to create an atmosphere. So there's not a lot of energy for the teams to run off of. And sometimes that can kind of translate onto the ice. There weren't a ton of shots on goal until the third period. And in the third, it's funny because in the third is kind of when the big crowd starts to settle in because you've got, the two teams for the later game, their fans starting to arrive. But the third period, I thought, was the best of that game. That's when BC got the game winner. But two freshmen getting the goals for BC. It's so typical. The big stage, sometimes it's the youngest guys that come forward because they don't have the pressure. They tend to, just kind of go out and play their game. Next year, they'll go back to that tournament, win or lose next Monday, and probably feel a little bit more pressure. So a very good opener. And for BC, it probably means a lot to get that one off their back.
Well, and this is the time of year, you mentioned freshmen. This is the time of the season when all the freshman jitters have gone away, when the adjustment to the speed of the college game and the size and physicality of some of the upperclassmen you face, you've gotten used to that. The cliche is, well, they're no longer rookies. Well, yeah, technically they still are rookies. They still are freshmen. But with 25 or so games under their belt or more right now, these players have finally adjusted. So this is where you start to see those freshmen sometimes really step up in the latter part of the first year.
Yeah, Jerry York even addressed that a little bit after the game because he was asked about Oliver Wahlstrom, who set up the game-winning goal. And, he mentioned a lot of expectations were on Wahlstrom coming in, and, people thought that maybe he didn't have the greatest first half of the season. But as Jerry said, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to get acclimated to the speed of this game. And I think that at this point, you're seeing some of these guys, that, especially the top freshmen, really start to take control of the game and show that they know that their system and they know that they belong. And you saw that last night, because I thought that freshmen really did play a pretty big role in both games for that matter, but certainly for Boston College.
Well, the later game, also a 2-1 score, but overtime, everybody had to wait around for 15 minutes for less than a minute of action. But in that one, Northeastern prevailed over Boston University.
Yeah, and this was, ironically, this had a very different feel to it, kind of run and gun from the start, a lot of great chances at both ends. And then finally, the game was tied at 1 after the first 20 minutes because Northeastern scored a really early one. BU gets one late in the first. The last 20 minutes of the game were just completely dominated by Northeastern. And that's where you saw Boston University and their goaltender, especially Jake Ottinger, play like the Boston University of old in this tournament. There were many times, anybody will remember from the early to mid 90s, really the early 90s, all the way through most of the 2000s, BU absolutely dominated this tournament. There was a couple of years here and there where BC would pull off a win, but BU either won or got to the finals of almost every Beanpot. But sometimes they did not have the best team, and they got there because their goaltender would steal one. And Jake Ottinger was close to doing that. I think he finished with 47 saves in the game, 24 of them coming in the third period when Northeastern was just, kind of a shooting gallery out there. But ironically, in all that, Boston University was getting their fair share of chances every now and again. They had a couple of breakaways that Caden Primo needed to save, both of them on Joel Farabee, who's obviously, people from the World Juniors will remember what a dynamic player he is and a very good scorer. So in the end, you're right. It was a very short-lived overtime. As soon as there was one shot, it happened to be a breakaway. It happened to be Tyler Madden, who another World Junior name people will remember. He ends up getting in alone on Ottinger and putting it 5-hole. But that was a very entertaining second game last night. And the fans that stuck around till it was about 11:05 at night on the East Coast, they got their fair share of entertaining hockey.
You mentioned Tyler Madden. He was all the buzz on social media, especially Twitter last night.
Well, he does like his goal celebrations, and about 2.5 weeks ago against UMass, he scored the game winner when UMass was number 1, and Northeastern won that game 2-1 as well. That one, he decided to paddle a canoe on the ice as his slide, and then had the good old canoe paddle going. Last night, he did the big slide with snow angels. So it's almost like he's got some of these prepped celebrations, and as I put in my story last night, I don't think Jim Madigan cares too much about those as long as they're winning games right now and getting to a Beanpot final for the second straight year. In the shot to win a second one, that was a big discussion point for Madigan after the game as to how it's so difficult to win this tournament back-to-back years, and as few Beanpots as Northeastern has won. They've only won 5. 4 of them came in the 1980s, and they did go back-to-back in 84, 85. Harvard has never won back-to-back titles in the tournament, which is pretty incredible. Obviously, a lot of their success came in the real early days of the tournament, but Harvard has never won back-to-back. So Jim Madigan feels it's pretty special just to get the chance to do it against Boston College next Monday night. And Northeastern will go into that game as the favorite. There's no doubt about that. And if they can pull that off, to pull off back-to-back Beanpots after going 30 years without winning the championship at all, that'll be pretty special as well.
Well, for Boston College, they will be facing a team from Hockey East, even though it's a non-conference game. And despite what's been a dismal non-conference record, the Eagles are right near the top in Hockey East and doing well in the conference.
That's kind of been the MO of this team 2 years in a row where they're in this exact same position where they did not play well out of conference, but here they are in the pennant race, as Jerry York likes to call it. And it's gotten tight at the top, and I guess it's been tight for some time, but right now you have 7 teams within 7 points. Now, 7 points when you're talking first place, okay, maybe first place isn't that attainable for a team like New Hampshire or maybe Providence or BU, or Providence, BU are both 6 points out. But BC and UMass Lowell are right there nipping on the heels of UMass. And I know that Lowell gets another game against UMass this week, so you have a chance to pick up some points. It's become a really competitive conference race right now. And BC within the conference has played extremely well. UMass has continued their winning ways. They had a wild game last Friday night against Boston University, a 7-5 game that just kind of went back and forth. And I wasn't there. I was at Northeastern that night, but those who were there said it was one of the more entertaining games they've seen all year. Obviously you'd love to see some defense, and I know some defensemen were not happy with their performances, but at the same time, you had some awesome offense that was on display. Both of those teams can score goals. And the key, I think, down the stretch will be which of those teams decides they can defend the best, because I think you still have some BU and BC. We can talk about down years. You still have a lot of high end talent on those teams. Then you're throwing in UMass, which we know has a lot of talent in there. Northeastern and Lowell kind of feel similar to me, where they've got some good players, but they're just really gelling right now as a team. So that Hockey East race is one heck of a pennant race to watch out for.
Well, we'll take a look at some more pennant races, including the PairWise, when we continue with USCHO Weekend Review. But first, let's pause for a word from our friends at the NCAA Frozen Four. It's coming up soon, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo.
Speed and precision, unrelenting power. This trophy is not given, it must be earned. The 2019 NCAA Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo.
With a shot, saved by Morris. Takes the shot,
Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 and get your tickets today.
Continuing with USCHO Weekend Review, I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. We wanted to take some time to look at the PairWise rankings. And as I'm looking at them this morning after yesterday's Beanpot results, they've bumped around a little bit. They're so volatile at this time of year. But there's some teams that right now are really in danger of only getting in by winning their conference championships. Some names that you would not necessarily expect. Now, you like to call it, in reference to a poor batting average, the Mendoza line. And that's a good way to do it. But 16 and above is absolutely the cutoff. You have absolutely no chance of getting an at-large below number 16. And more realistically, maybe 15 or 14, depending on what happens with the Atlantic Hockey or WCHA championship winners, and maybe even a dark horse in one of the other leagues. And by dark horse, it doesn't even have to be somebody unexpected. Right now with Yale or Michigan State or even Union or Penn State outside of the PairWise rankings, if they were to win their league championships, they would bump somebody from an at-large position. So how would you like to jump in? You want to look at the teams that right now are on the bubble? Let's start there first.
Yeah, because I think some of the names are really interesting. Right now I look at teams that have just made the Frozen Four in recent years: Providence, Notre Dame, Harvard, Union, North Dakota, Yale. They're all below. And when we're getting into talking about North Dakota and Yale, both of them are real slight chances, below 20% chance to get in, even if they win out their games that they have in the regular season. Like, that's how bad a position they've all put themselves. So it's going to come down to a lot of conference tournaments, and the teams right above the bubble right now, you're looking at, Northeastern, Clarkson, UMass Lowell, and Bowling Green. They're all one weekend away from slipping. That's the reality of where you are. In Northeastern, actually, I was looking at their numbers a little bit more in depth last night. They're actually in probably a better position because they're in the same battle with UMass Lowell, and they have an extra win in the head-to-head. So it's going to be very difficult for UMass Lowell to get past Northeastern at any point unless they really bump up their RPI, and at the same time their record against common opponents surpasses Northeastern. That's pretty much the only way that they can pass Northeastern. So Northeastern will always stay above Lowell. So if you see teams starting to drop, and you maybe comes down to a tie for the last spot when all is said and done, and if it's Northeastern and Lowell, Northeastern should have that edge. All of that said, there's just not a lot of wiggle room right now for teams from 11 on down. Like you've got to be thinking about playing as perfect a hockey as you can. You want to be playing 100 hockey as much as you can for the rest of the regular season. You need to get out of your first round of your conference playoffs, so you're going to be in trouble. I know that teams like to control their own destiny. If you're going to control your own destiny when it comes to the PairWise right now, it's winning and winning as often as you can, because there's still, even if you feel like you're in a great position to make this tournament, any mistakes, it feels like could go a long way, especially if they're magnified. If you're losing to a team that's not high in the RPI, if you're losing an entire weekend series, you're getting swept on a weekend, those types of things can be really detrimental for those bubble clubs.
And case in point, Providence and Notre Dame. Notre Dame with a sweep at the hands of Ohio State, and Providence a win and a tie with Vermont. Providence had dropped to number 17 in the PairWise over the weekend. Games last night have buoyed them a little bit up to number 15, but they are really a bubble team that needs to do exactly what you said.
Yeah, you have to avoid the lost weekend. That's really what it comes down to. And Providence only got 1 point against Vermont. Notre Dame got nothing. Look at even Harvard last night. Harvard began last night, if my memory serves right, at 13 in the PairWise, and a loss to Boston College has dropped them all the way down to 17. So for Ivies, it becomes even more magnified because of the fact that you play less games. So in the whole formula of it all, you're doing this with a lower number of game totals. So one game in the course of a 27 game schedule is magnified more than one game in the course of a 34 game schedule.
Well, let's talk about another team whose fortunes in the PairWise have gone up over the last weekend, and that's Arizona State. Now, I got to see Arizona State twice over the weekend, and they are as advertised. They are a very good team, and I think they would be a good team without Joey Decord, but with him in net, they become a very good team. And the reason for that is a couple of things. One, he made the difference in both games over the weekend, even though Friday's result may seem like a blowout at 6-1. It was close at 3-0, 3-1. Lots of pressure. Breakaways stopped and pressure around the net stopped. On Saturday, even more so. 2 1-on-0 shorthand, one shorthanded breakaway and another breakaway stopped by Decord. I think he's the difference in Arizona State right now, being 19-10-1 and being more like a 500 club with the schedule they've had. The other one I want to mention out of that group is Johnny Walker, and he is the top scorer in the country for a reason. And it's not because he's a flashy skater. It's not that you even notice him that much until he gets around the net. And then he's got great hands and a great nose for scoring. And once he's in the vicinity of the net, then that becomes a big deal. So Arizona State, a couple other things with them. I think this is the other thing with Joey Decord, is his strength in net maybe is what is allowing Arizona State to keep somebody up high more than another team might do. Because if you get caught with your forwards down low or behind the net against Arizona State and they get possession, it's going to be 3-on-2, 3-on-1, 4-on-2 up the other way very quickly, and they can transition well. Some weaknesses with them, I think they've got to watch out. They've got a very good penalty kill, but I wasn't impressed with their power play. And, I think analytics has gotten to do a lot of this, the drop passes and so forth. But it seemed to me that Arizona State was spending more time on drop passes in the neutral zone than they were establishing some possession in the offensive zone on the power play. And, their numbers kind of show that on both sides of special teams. But I think that they are right now a very good team, and with a netminder like Decord, if you can ride him for another shutout to go with his 7 or keep it to 1 goal, Arizona State has an opportunity to go pretty far in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree with everything you've said there. I do think that Decord might be the best goaltender in the nation right now. Mm-hmm. And I really don't have any qualms saying that, having seen him as much as I have on tape and knowing that he has really carried his team. Without DeCourt, I don't think they're anywhere near this position. They're a good team, but they're not on the verge of the 20th win. In terms of where I see them in this NCAA picture, they win their last 4 games, they're in. There's no doubt about that. If they go 500 over those games, I still think they're in. I think that there's even a chance, from numbers that I'm seeing and calculations I rely on, that if they lost all 4 of their games, they'd still probably be about a 1 in 4 chance to get in the tournament. That there's the possibilities there. Yes, they would be sweating it out in the last night of the season. They might drop to 14 or 15 in the PairWise, but they still have that chance. They're not dead if they lose all 4 games. But what they would like to do is take 2 this weekend at home. This is their last 2 games at home. They're playing AIC, which we know is a very good team, and playing as best as they can in Atlantic hockey. But at the same time, you're at home, and this has been a home ice advantage all season when they played at Oceanside. And these 2 games over at Oceanside, the smaller building, the feels like a smaller ice surface. I'm not sure the actual dimensions. The crowd's right on top of you. It's loud. That's going to be a tough environment for AIC. So this weekend's big. Then 2 weeks from now, it's 3 weeks from now. I don't know how you want to say it, but a week off, and then they'll play Minnesota. And if you've lost these 2 games this weekend, you're going to be really kind of panicked and thinking you have to beat Minnesota on the road. If you win these 2 games, you might feel a little bit more settled. And those games against Minnesota might not be as nerve-wracking. You might not be gripping your stick as tightly. I like this team's chances of getting in. They got much better last week when they bounced up to 8 in the PairWise. You're talking about a team that could be a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament that nobody even thought would be a 500 team. So it's been impressive. I've enjoyed the run. I know you have as well, kind of watching this from afar. I'm glad you got to see them play last weekend. But this is a real team. This is a team that's going to be there at the end.
You mentioned AIC, and American International right now is way out in front in Atlantic hockey, but they have played 4 more games than a number of the teams in the league. And so they only have 4 league games left, which brings us to Bentley. If I asked just about any hockey fan out there who follows college hockey, who has the longest unbeaten streak in college hockey right now, they'd be hard pressed to say Bentley. But the Falcons, they're 7 points behind American International, but have 4 games in hand. Right now, that's a pretty good place to be for Bentley. And, you've seen Bentley. I've seen Bentley this year. They are not, I don't think, head and shoulders above anybody else in Atlantic hockey, because none of the good teams in Atlantic hockey are head and shoulders above anybody else. It's that tight. The league is got a lot of parity, and the teams are playing well. What Bentley is doing, whether it's a spark from forward, whether it is a great save or 2 from Aiden Polino, whatever it is, they are finding the little things they need to do to win. And when you start getting that mojo going, you really start building some momentum. And, you could even be looking at something like an AIC Bentley final in Atlantic hockey, which if you had told anybody before the season, they might have chuckled. And if you told anybody that 4 years ago, they would have laughed out loud. That's where these teams have come. But what Bentley is doing this year, what Ryan Soderquist is doing with them in their brand new barn, is really impressive.
Yeah, you know what? It took them a while to grasp the system, and I've seen them a number of times this year. They're for early going games. I did not think that they looked as strong as they have of late. And, for the most part, I think the biggest part is their defense and their ability to defend. They've gotten a lot better within their zone defending, and that's a huge part of it. You can't lose men in your zone, and they were doing that a lot at the beginning of the year. And at the same time, I've looked at a little bit of highlights in the last couple of weeks, and I get sent stuff from their SID for goals of the week nominations, and they've had a lot of good transition plays. So they've got the talent, and now they've put themselves in a position. To think that at this weekend, after this weekend, if they were to pull off a couple of wins, and knowing AIC's out of conference, here you're in a position to maybe late in the season make a run and win the regular season title. It seems so far-fetched for this team that was so far behind at the break, but they have played some great hockey down the stretch, and I'm glad. I love Ryan Soderquist. I've known him for a long time, since he was a player at Bentley, and covered him back then, and he's put a lot of heart into this team, and it would be good to see them get some reward for that.
Well, and to kind of wrap up, as we get into the postseason and single elimination games, anything can happen. Now, the first round and the second round in that conference are best of three, but when you get to the final rounds in the various leagues, and especially the NCAAs, if you had, if St. Cloud and Bentley, let's just pull a couple out of the air, played a 7-game series, St. Cloud would probably win 5 or 6 of those, or maybe 6 wins in a tie. But you play one game against a team, you game plan for one team, you have a hot goalie in that game, you execute well, you get a couple of bounces your way, anything can happen. And we've seen that the past several seasons in the NCAA. So it's not time to laugh out anybody. It's to look at right now who is playing really well as we head into the stretch.
Yeah, all you have to do is list out things like Niagara, Holy Cross, Air Force, RIT, Bemidji State as teams that nobody had even heard of going into these tournaments, and they all pulled off upsets at some point in the tournament. So it's one and done is a scary way to live life, but it's also the most exciting, and that's what the NCAA tournament is about.
Well, this one is done. We'll be back with more podcasts this week here from USCHO.com, but that's going to wrap it up for Weekend Review. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit USCHO.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.